So welcome everyone to our webinar, our live webinar this evening. Very excited for our speakers today. Before we get into the topic, I just want to talk a little bit about what's bringing this webinar to you. So there is the Fathers Matters, mobilizing Fathers Matter has an overarching program mobilizing fatherhood in Metro Atlanta. And in March of this year of 2020, there was a multi-sector team of leaders in community, academia, health and human services. And there was a summit and everyone got together and brought in their experience and research and towards realizing this shared vision. And when developing this vision, the work kind of formulated itself into 7 main strategies. And that is connecting fathers to resources and to each other, reaching fathers, reclaiming, in parentheses, changing the narrative, supporting inner healing, improving relationships between fathers and agencies, and then relationships between parents, addressing mass incarceration and implementing father-friendly policies. And so this workshop is a part of one of the strategies of improving relationships between fathers and parents. And so I'm very excited today. We have our speakers, Shelly Lindsay and Tyrone Hunter, and we're going to talk about handling conflict. So our speakers will introduce themselves. We'll get into the content. If you have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat. We'll have a question and answer session at the end, but feel free to engage in the chat as we go along. And I will turn it over now to Ms. Lindsay.
Well, good evening. Thank you for that warm introduction, and I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. I'm Shelly Lindsay. I'm a licensed social worker, as well as I work at Morehouse School of Medicine in the Office of Institutional Advancement. I see some couples on the side, as well as I've worked with other agencies around co-parenting workshops. You can follow me on co-parenting_coach on Instagram. So I'm super excited to present this information along with my co-speaker, Mr. Tyrone Hunter.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Tyrone Hunter. I'm the founder and CEO of a playbook called Playbook for Fatherhood. I've been doing this for almost 6 years. I started my ministry about 2 years ago, and the biggest thing is that we're showing fathers that matter in the child's life, and that's the main thing. We do workshops. We do 24/7 Dad. We do Dr. Dad, and we have mentorship going on through our workshops. And I'm happy to be here. You can look me up at You can look me up at playbookforfathers.com. That's my website, and it's also on a flyer. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So tonight we're gonna go over, we have a short period of time to get a lot of good information in that me and Mr. Hunter is going to review. As Ms. Dina said, you can utilize the chat box to ask us questions. This is free flowing, and so we're more than happy to stop and engage you in a Q&A if need be. If not, at the end, we'll have some time to offer and to extend additional information if you have questions that you want to ask us around some of the tips that we are going to present tonight. So the first one that we have here is one of our tips out of the 6, and it's putting the child first. And so out of everything that we talk about this evening, I think the most important thing when we're talking about dealing with conflict is remembering that at the center of it all, or the core of everything, we want to be able to put the child or the children's first. Sometimes we know in some of these tips that we're going to present, it is very challenging. You might have a challenging co-parent. You might have moments in time where you and the other co-parent do not see eye to eye, and it's difficult and challenging to come up with a resolution. But the most important thing is sometimes, as we say, take a step back, breathe, reevaluate the situation, figure out where you can compromise on your end, and remember that at the end of the day, it's really important to reach an agreement based on the needs of the child. What is going to be best for the child? How is the child going to be able to engage both parents, both families in a healthy manner where they're not experiencing or feeling the conflict between the two parents. And so throughout many of the tips, the one piece that we want to keep reminding you is put the child first. Remember that at the center, the child did not ask to be in this particular situation, and we want to try to help the child navigate through this situation with as much ease and emotional health, healthy emotional stability as we possibly can offer the particular child and or children. And sometimes that means taking a step back, breathing through it and saying, how can I make this work for the benefit of my child? How can I engage this co-parent for the benefit of my child? Yes, I might be upset with something that they've said, it's something that they did, but at the end of the day, it's important for either me to see my child or for them to see my child, or whatever the dynamic is that you two are disputing. How can I make a decision or give my feedback in a way that will benefit my child? Mr. Hunter, how do you feel about that? And what is some of the advice you typically give the fathers that you work with as well?
One of the things that we talk about is that is the first thing, because we get caught up in the relationship, the relationship the other person might have with somebody else, relationship somebody else have with somebody else, and we forget about the child. And we don't realize that you might not see it in the beginning, you might not see it's hurting the child, but in the long run, it's going to hurt them. It hurts them because they might have relationship issues. One of the things that we do is, like, when we have, the mother might have the child and they might say something bad about the father. The father might have the child say something bad about the mother. So now the child's caught in the middle, and I'm just talking from experience, in the long run, whoever talks bad about the child the most, about the parent the most, and they don't see it in the other parent, they're going to hold that against that parent. So it's very important that we put the child first. And even like with fathers, sometimes bringing a woman over, around your child is probably not the best thing in the beginning, either parent, because that's caused conflict. Now you're like, why are you bringing this man around my child? Why are you bringing this woman around my child? So you really got to be cautious, because statistics show it's not the divorce that hurts the child. It's the conflict between the co-parenting that hurts the child. So we just got to be, aware of what we're doing. And like I always tell my guys, it's not about her. Even if you go to that house and you feel an argument, I said, just take it's about your child. Don't worry about anything else. It's about your child. And I just tell them, man, I said, put your big boy pants on and just bite your tongue and walk away, because it's about your child. You want to see your child. So just remember that.
Very good. I agree with you. The number 2 tip that we have is we talk about creating communication guidelines. And I think one of the things that me and Mr. Hunter will express in this part is setting your own expectations, and then also setting the expectations of the co-parent. And eventually down the slide, we'll talk about what does communication look like between the both of you. But I think when we talk about setting expectations, right, is that setting your own expectations, especially when you're getting ready to address a situation that might be heavy on your heart, or something that has annoyed you, or something behavior that you did not appreciate of the other co-parent. And so one of the things that, at least in my situation, because I'm a co-parent as well, is really try not to assume answers, right? And so what we find, if we have friends or other relatives that are close to us, they'll say, well, what do you think they're going to say? And so as co-parent, we always say, oh, I know they're going to say no, or oh, I know they're going to say this, or I know they're going to do this. It doesn't even make sense for me to go into this conversation. And you end up having a whole dialogue with yourself or with the other person without the real person being a part of it. And so one of the things when we talk about setting your own expectation is, don't go in there with the expectation that the person is going to react a certain way. Because if we do that, we're already setting up for how we think the conversation is going to end. And chances are it's going to end in the way that we already predetermined it, right? If we know they're already going to say no, the way that we're going to approach the situation, if we're asking, for extended time, or if we're asking for them to change their behavior, is that as soon as they respond with a negative notion, we are automatically going to be like, oh, you already saying no, I already know. And so now we're shutting off communication, and we've already started kickstarting, as I like to say, conflict, right? One, the other piece that I would say, when you're setting your own expectations, try not to go in there with presenting the past. Let the past be the past. At any moment in time, someone could realistically change their behavior. And so one of us in this co-parenting dynamic has to be the person to be the Kickstarter to changing the dynamic. And some of that starts by letting the past be the past. Think carefully about how you want to respond. So if you know you have, and I always say trigger moments, right? Somebody going to say something, or they're going to name talk, and we're going to talk a little bit about name talking later on, but think carefully. I know this person might say this, so let me step back and think that at the end of the day, I'm putting the child first. So I'm going to lead with the child. I'm not going to lead with name calling. I'm not going to lead with this is what I want. I'm not going to lead with you always do X, Y, and Z. So before you go in there, setting your own expectations of thinking about how you're going to respond, how calmly you're going to respond, and actually knowing your triggers. One of the things that I do a lot with some of the couples that I work with, especially in single sessions, is talking about what are triggers, what are trigger words, what are trigger moments, what are trigger looks, because it's not just verbal, but it's also nonverbal. And also when you're setting your own expectation, knowing when to tag out moments, right? So if somebody's texting you and they're going back and forth, the next thing you know, and I will be admitting, sometimes when my co-parent says something, my text message is vomit. I'm like, blah, 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 right? I'm that person. And so I have to know, okay, if I'm at 3 text messages now, it's time for me to tag out, pick up the phone and start talking, right? And it's the same thing. If we're talking and he says something and I'm like, blah, 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 I'm like, you know what? Let me tag out. And some situations are best through text. Some best situations are best through talking. But you have to set your own expectation. And it's the same thing as I get ready to turn it over to Mr. Hunter to talk about this, is set expectations for your co-parent. Let them know what your goal is. So you might want to start off the conversations like, hey, I really want to talk to you about, more time with Morgan. I'm just making that example up. And I'm hoping that at the end of this conversation, we can establish what more time looks. That is how you set up the expectation for communicating with your co-parent and allowing them to ask questions. I think sometimes when we're in co-parenting dynamics, and I think Mr. Hunter, you talk about when you're bringing in another partner, sometimes we don't create the space for the other person to ask questions and for us to feel comfortable to answer the question. Sometimes it might feel as if we're being interrogated, or they might feel like they're being interrogated, when we need to set the expectation, may I please ask questions until I'm comfortable with understanding where it is that you're coming from. And again, same thing for our partners, knowing when to tag out, knowing when to text, knowing when to talk. If somebody say I'm having a bad day, respect that space and say, hey, I see you, I hear you having a bad day. Can we talk about this later? And set the expectation of, when I say later, I would like for it to be, today, and let that be okay. But it's really important that you go into the conversation with setting your own expectations of how you're going to respond and when you need to tag out. And it's also really important for you to set the expectation for when they're going to respond and what their triggers are and when they need to tag out. And I find like a lot of times with the couples that I work with, both parties don't know when to tag out. It's like, we're just going to win. We're going to just keep going round and round and round. And that boxing bell goes ding, 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 ding. And we still boxing, as opposed to having a moment to say, you know what, this is a moment we need to tag out, because at this point where it's personal, it's no longer about the child. What do you feel about that, Mr. Hunter, and some of the clients you've worked with?
Well, the men I work with, that's one of the biggest things, the boundaries. And, what we say, unfortunately, we're working with men who's trying to see their children, but one of the things we say, put everything on paper. Everything has to be written down. Everything has to be agreed on. So you know what time you're supposed to have your child, and you know what time you're supposed to have the child back. If you're going to have a conversation, you want more time, do not wait till you're going to pick up the child to ask for more time. That's not a right time to talk about it. Talk about it before that. Have a conversation before that. Like you said, if there's somebody else in your life, let that person know before the child comes over. The last thing you want to do is have your child come over, and then go back to mom and dad. Oh, such, because they're going to go back and tell. Oh, such and such, so that starts another argument. Why didn't you tell me? So you have to learn to keep the communication, open. And one of the things that we talk about with, is your body language. When you communicate, if you're saying something, you can read each other's body. If you're saying something, you don't mean it, they can tell, like, and that starts like, oh, you're not even listening to me, or, you don't mean what you say. So we try to say eye to eye contact, try to control your body language, and don't go in there with an attitude. Like you said before, if you got an attitude, don't even go there. I just come to pick up. Can we talk about it later? I just come to pick up my child, and we could talk about it when we don't have the child. So, we talk about body language, we talk about eye contact, and we just say, you just say what you mean. And I like what you said about the boundaries, because, one of the biggest things that we find is that especially when the man gets another woman in his life, and it seems like, she sometimes, if the woman wants to trying to get the man back, she feels her boundaries is being I can't find the word,
Challenged.
being challenged. Thank you. Being challenged. So guys, what I'm saying is, don't let that happen. Just, if there is somebody, let her know, talk about it. And if there's going to be a problem, let the person you with say, well, let's take this slowly, because you already know, how to communicate with this person, and you know how it's going to be. So just take it slowly. Just let her know, this ain't a good time for me to talk to her about this. I already know. We're still going through the issue of working out our co-parenting time, our co-parenting expectation. We're still working that out. So don't bring on more than you need to if you're already having communication issues. So, just take it slow. And if you're going to talk to somebody, put it this way, talk to somebody that's going through what you're going through. Because it's hard to talk to somebody who's not been there, or your boy, because your boy sometimes ain't going to give you the right answer. Just try to find somebody that, that's going through it. And that's one of the things we encourage. And we started a little group, because we have guys that, have met guys now, have been through what they're going through, and now they know how to handle it. We have many guys that know how to communicate. They would just go there with an attitude, and there'd be a big argument in front of the kids. Now they understand, maybe this is not the time to talk about it. We can talk about it later. It's just like texting. If you can't talk, text. You can't talk on the phone, just text. Not nasty text, but text, and try to work it out that way. And then when you set a text, if you set a time and a place to talk, make sure you're doing it without the child around. Just do it one-on-one, and just do it with each other. And then make sure you both agree, and then get it on paper. I always say, get it on paper so you both can agree on it, and just go from there.
Totally agree with you. I think one of the things when we talk about this one, number 2, in create communication guidelines, I think one of the things that both you and I hit on, that I'm hoping that everybody heard, is really paying attention to your senses, and when is it an appropriate time to engage in conversation, especially if it's going to be a difficult subject, right? Early on in my co-parenting relationship, one of the tools that we utilize a lot is we would lead with, this is a difficult situation. This is a difficult topic or conversation for me, before warning the person, I'm already uncomfortable, but I need to have this conversation. And so that was one of the tools that we did, that we led with, was, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. Is right now an appropriate time? Especially if we knew it was a hot topic for us. And that's something that I usually tell some of the couples that I work with. Sometimes it's good to lead with that, letting the person know, one, I'm already uncomfortable to have this conversation, but also letting the other person bring down their guard, because I'm being vulnerable and saying, this is a difficult conversation for me to have, or I would like for us to have a challenging conversation. Use whatever verbiage you want to use that's suitable for you, but also it's very good to kind of tag in and say, hey, this is the situation that we're getting ready to go into. I really want to be able to have this conversation with you. Is now a good time? And that was something that worked really well for us, especially in the early stages, when it was really tense for us, when we're creating communication guidelines. Is really kind of checking in with that pulse check, right? As we say as therapists, what's the pulse check? Are you having a good day or not having a good day? Is this a good moment? If it's not a good moment, but also setting the expectation of, if we're going to talk about it later, let's talk about it later. Don't put it off, or as we say, don't put too many, don't put too many animals in the house. The old saying is, there's an elephant in the room. Well, we were in therapy one time, and it was like, I see an elephant, I see a giraffe, I see a hippo. It's all of these animals are in the room and we're not addressing it. And so that was one of the tools that we utilize when we talk about creating communication guidelines. And that helps set expectations for us of what we're hoping that we're able to accomplish, and then also allow for the other co-parent to also figure out what their expectation was and begin to kind of set it up so it can be a positive outcome when we're getting ready to have difficult conversations. Let's see. I'm trying to get to number 3. So number 3, we talked a lot about this, right? Trash talking is very common in co-parenting situations. So one thing, and using word choices and tones are really key. I think one of the areas that I come from that's slightly different in co-parent is that most of the individuals that I work with were not married when the child became into the world. So it wasn't a relationship where we were in love or they were in love. It was kind of like we had a really great night and now we have this child. And so you're getting to know some of the couples that I work with, they're getting to know their co-parent while they're also learning how to co-parent. So it's very difficult when you're having to get to know somebody, what they like, what they don't like, what's their tone, when they're being sarcastic, when they're not being sarcastic, if they have dry humor or not. And so one of the things in that scenario that's slightly different from people who were previous married is that you're doing 2 things in dualism, if you will. You're learning the individual, and then you also learn the individual as a parent. And that could be very challenging. And so one space that we typically see a lot in co-parenting, even after divorce or co-parenting in this situation, is the trash talking when you have reached your bubble, right? And it's the under the breath comment, or it's the side comment, or it's the, as we say, it's around the world comment. It's like, I'm saying it, but I'm not really saying it, but I'm gonna say it. I think Mr. Hunter talked a lot about nonverbal communication. That as I'm talking, you look away. If I'm talking, you texting. If I'm talking, you roll your eye or snicker or something like that. That's trash talking, right? And so when we're talking about right now in this session, we're talking really a lot about how do you handle conflict? What does conflict look like, especially through communication? And so one of the things you'll hear us talk a lot about is building effective communication. I think the core at a lot of conflict, regardless of, if you were married or not married, is really learning how we build effective communication. The way that I might speak to Mr. Tyrone might be very different than I talk to the father of my child. But that we have to, it's like building a relationship. You have to build communication relationship, if you will. So if I know that my partner or my co-parent is not in favorable of, snicker or rolling in the eyes, and those are triggers, I'm going to work towards making sure that when we are communicating, that I'm not doing those things because those are trigger moments. Try to stay away from language that is for the sole purpose is offensive and hurting. So like, you're dumb, you're stupid, or even saying what you're saying is dumb or stupid, because in the heat of a moment or when there's conflict that is on the horizon and you say that is dumb or that is stupid, that person can only hear, oh, I think they just called me dumb. I think they just called me stupid. So being very mindful of those language, or as I say, name calling. Or if you say, well, the way you grew up was silly, or it was dumb, those are trash talking words. Or if the parents say, I really want to celebrate Christmas, that's stupid. Being very mindful when you're talking about conflict, what that tone is. If somebody says something and you recognize that they're being vulnerable and your response is, huh, or, whatever, man, that's one I hear often that women talk about, is that he just be like, whatever. That is not appropriate or building effective communication, because obviously your partner is looking for a response. And if you don't have a response, what mamas used to say or grandmothers used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say nothing at all. So sometimes it's best, again, to tag out and say, I hear what you're saying. So we want to say, acknowledge that you heard what the person had to say and say, can I get some time to think about this and get back with you, right? As opposed to trash talking and find yourself in a dynamic where your tone is coming across as one thing, but your words might be saying something different. Mr. Hunter talked a lot about the face-to-face. Sometimes face-to-face is good, but if you know you're triggered by your partner, maybe face-to-face is not good. We're in the time of Zoom. So set up a Zoom time, set up a FaceTime. There are ways where you don't have to be, face-to-face. Do old school phone calls. Sometimes that works. Or one of a good tool that I've seen a lot of people use, put it in email. Say, you know what? I hear what you're saying. I can't respond appropriately right now without making you upset. I'm just going to put it in the email. It's great for documentation to say that you tried to address it. And it also allows for the co-parent enough time to really sit down, see what you wrote, digest what you wrote, and give an appropriate response. It may be difficult to do this early on, but we really want to try to express to you, try to collaborate and come to some type of decision in a non-judgmental and a collaborative way. Really work to treat the issue and not the person. And that's something that is so important. When you're dealing with conflict, you're not dealing with the person, you're dealing with the conflict, you're dealing with the problem. Try to stay focused on that. Sometimes, and I'm just be real, sometimes you can't resolve every single conflict. And at that, what I've told couples before, pick your battles. What is really important to what is really not that important. Every battle doesn't need to be won. And because you're in the battle, that doesn't require for you to start the name talking, to start picking word choices that you know are trigger, start talking about person's friends or family or why they make decisions or why they hurt you. As they say, let the past be the past, because at the end of the day, you want to treat the issue and not the person. You want to address the behavior and not the person. Mr. Hunter, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Okay, this is the big thing with the guys. Like you always say, it's not what you say, is the way you say it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's one of the biggest things that we talk about. And one of the things that one of the gentlemen have is that his mother of his child, has what you call a poof mouth. Okay, and every time he calls her or something, she just goes off on him. So we try to help him limit that. Her good days, but another thing, he knows her triggers too. So her triggers. So why are you triggering her to get to that point? Mm-hmm. And, it works both ways. So, but one of the things we talk about is called fight or flight. And what I mean by that is, with your body language, sometimes when you go to that house and if you're relaxed and you're talking to them, but if you you're not willing to fight, but your body looks like you're ready for a fight. You're going to the house, I just know I'm ready for a fight. She's just going to give me a hard time. And your body language is like, you're ready to fight. And right then and there, as soon as she opens that door, there's going to be a fight. The language is going to be, because you already see it coming. So we try to tell them, you got to relax. Don't go there looking like you're ready to argue. Go there, relax. Even though you might not, you might be angry about something. You might have had a bad day. Or you might remember the conversation that you had last time you was there. You have to learn how to, your body, you have to be relaxed. Don't go there looking for a fight. Because see, the biggest thing is that the child is right there listening to y'all too. And that language is coming out, and that hurts the child. She's just seeing how you two communicate. So the more effective communication you have, the better communication your child has. Because me and my ex-wife, we've had that issue. And my daughters now have kind of relationship issues because of how we handle stuff. And so I'm just talking from experience. So what I'm saying, you really have to really build an effective communication, no matter how hard it is, and what we try to tell them is just, and it's hard. And I ain't gonna lie, some of these guys tell me, man, you just don't know. You just don't know. It's hard. She says stuff to me and I want to say this. And I said, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth you coming back? Is it worth her coming back? See, our thing is that somebody says something bad, we want to say something bad back. It's just human nature. It's just human nature. But sometimes you got to bite your tongue. Sometimes you got to just realize what you got to come back. What is the main thing in this whole thing is that child. So effective communication, just not for the peace of you, it's for the peace of that child. So everything here we're going through is the trash talking, because if you're trash talking in front of her, I can imagine what you're doing when you're with the child, because you're angry. So you're getting in the car, you're pissed off already because you done trash talk her. Now you're in the car, you're cursing up a storm. Who's in the back seat? Your child. If the child comes home and you're pissed off at your dad, at the father of the child, and you still, you're closing the door, so you still cursing him out because he's gone, but you still gotta, who's listening to that? Your child. So you really have to control the trash talking. You really gotta build an effective communication. We ain't saying it's going to be overnight. It does take work. Trust me, it does take work. But one of the things that you really got to put in the front, and what I tell my dads, because see, a lot of my dads are trying to see their child, and a lot of my dads are trying to get legitimization and all this other stuff going on. So a lot of my dads are trying to, deal with a lot and trying to also deal with the mother of their children. But our main focus is that, listen, the children comes first. All that trash talking, all that language you're doing, it just making matters worse. So, how hard it is, you've got to remember that the child listens to everything your guys say. And all that trash talking and all that stuff in the long run is going to hurt them. So just try to work it out, try to do whatever you need to do. And these sessions like here, what we have, and I'm sure you have our information, and we have, we have different ways that we have mentorship. We have different ways that we hook up with guys, because, sometimes you can't do it on your own. You can't learn to communicate on your own. Sometimes it takes time. But if you get around people who knows how to do it and learn how to do it, you can get better at it, and just, and take step by step by step. And then, like I said, if you can't talk at that time, don't do it. Just take the child and say, well, please, can we talk later? And that's it. And just walk away and just get in the car.
Yeah, I think the key point for this is, treat the issue and not the person. Yeah. And if you find yourself in a situation not able to treat the issue, and the person wants you to deal with them person to person, it's time to tag out. And you'll hear that a lot. One thing that I'll express to everybody is really look into mindfulness and breathing techniques. And the thing with mindfulness, the key takeaway, because it's a whole workshop within itself, but the point for mindfulness is recognizing how your body is reacting to a situation. I think Mr. Hunter talked about when you are engaging a person in conversation, or you're getting ready to see that person, if you are already, stacked to fight, that is how your body is going to react to this situation, which ultimately is going to make your brain work in a defensive situation, which means that the words that's going to come out is going to be very defensive, as well as the tone that the person receives is going to be very defensive. So remember to try to treat the issue and not the person, and try to know when it's time for you to tag out. Which brings us to the number 4, avoid the push and pull. When we find with conflict, and so tonight's session is really focused a lot on, how do you handle when conflict is occurring, whether you walk away or if you have to be in that situation. But one thing that we find that continuously to build conflict is the push and pull, when individuals are not consistent. If you say you're going to call, you call. If you say you're going to show up, make sure you show up at the time. And it goes for both parties. This is not, yes, we're talking primarily to men, but this also for the women who have joined us this evening. This is something that's really important, is to be very consistent and to avoid the push and pull. It can be exhausting to you. It can be destabilizing to the children. And as we talked about, for number 1, putting the child first. And then also it can be detrimental to the relationship, never knowing if a person's going to show up. Conflict happens, whether you're in a healthy relationship or whether you're in a co-parenting relationship. Conflicts happen. Work relationships, conflicts happen. The thing about conflict is you have to see it through. You have to be able to work through it to the best of your ability in a non-judgmental way. As we say, treat the issue and not the person. And with that being said, you have to show up the next day. Yes, somebody makes you upset. Take your moment, maybe even take the day, but don't disappear. Don't ignore a phone call. Don't ignore a text. When you start to do that, that's a push and pull that's very demoralizing to the other person or the co-parent. And at that point, that's when conflict starts to build. So you're already in the conflict, and then you add to the conflict, and then you decide to do this push and pull. I kind of want to be bothered, but I don't want to be bothered. Now I'm ignoring you. Now you're building up more of a conflict, which makes it more difficult for you to have to work through some of these problems, right? It takes, as we said, it takes time. And so what you want to do is try to avoid layering the conflict. And so part of that is that push and pull. So really, if and as I heard Mr. Hunter say, some of this has a lot to do with fathers wanting to see their kids. And we'll talk a little bit about that in number 5, about how some parents tend to withhold their kids, from the other co-parent. And so when we talk about the push and pull, the best strategy is to lead by example, setting those boundaries, being comfortable. So you want to see your child, or you want to spend more time, or you want to give your child something. Be consistent, communicate as best you can, as much as you can, call as much as you can, let the other parent know, I am not here to trash talk you. I'm not here to put you down. At the end of the day, I want to have a relationship with the child, and to my best of my abilities, I want to have a healthy, interactive relationship with you, the co-parent. And so one of the things that I try to tell is, some of the parents that I work with, is the push and pull. You can't take a call. You can't take his call one day and then the next day you like, I want to ignore it. You can't take her text one day and then the next day you want to ignore it. You can't say you're going to show up and then all of a sudden you don't show up. I've heard some of my fathers say, well, she's always late. She disrespects my time. You can't do that. Everybody in this dynamic has to be consistent with their level of engagement. What has been some of your dynamics with this, Mr. Hunter, that you share with some of the fathers?
Yeah, one of the things I tell my dads, and as you know, let your yes be yes and you let your no be no. If you can't do something, say no. If you're going to do, say yes. But if you say yes, you make sure you're there and be on time to do that. But one of the biggest things that you just hit a point is that they have problems with, like they say, okay, the mom said I can have the child at this time. And then they go there, and then she'll change her mind, say, no, you can't, you got to come. I changed my mind. I want to take the child for this weekend. They got to go see something else. But now he's already prepared to have his child, and now he can't. So now so that brings on more animosity, because, all he's trying to, like I said, if you made it that time, you just got to stay with that time. And that's why we asked them, unfortunately, as you know, you got to go to court and you put everything on paper. Now, if you want to change that time and all that, this way you can say, okay, this is what you agreed to, and this is my time. Just like the holidays. If I'm going to have the child on Christmas and you're going to have the child on Thanksgiving, you can't say all of a sudden, even I tell the dad, you can't say all of a sudden, well, can I take the child for Christmas and you take the child for thing? You can't do that. Whatever you agree to, you have to stick with it. And what you can say, next year, can we switch it? This way you have time to work on it. You avoid that little push, you avoid that little pull, because, you might want the child for Christmas. So you say, okay, next year, can we switch? This way you both got time to work on it. Even though it might not work, but say you give that time to work on it. And you just don't ask, you just don't do things at the last minute. And this is one of the things that it's very, to avoid the push and the pull is very hard with the guys, because, a lot of them don't get it, either they can't see their child because they have somebody else in their life, and the mother will hold the child and say, well, you can't see him, because she gets jealous. So, so unless they have rights, this is one of the issues that they have, so then they got to go through the whole system of seeing their child. So, you really got to try to avoid doing that. It's better for the child. And like you said, we're going to talk about the importance of fathers, and people don't really realize how important for both parents to be in that child's life. And the more you have these pitfalls, the more you cause conflicts, the more you have all this push and pull, at the end of the day, it's going to hurt.
Very good. I think the key takeaway from this one is, for both parents, let the yes be the yes and the no be the no, especially if you are in the midst of conflict. I think once you get to a space of establishing a healthy relationship and boundaries, then some adjustments can be made. But I think what you said was very important. Let your yes be your yes and your no's be your no. And be consistent with it. And I think early on, we talked about setting those boundaries and really being able to stick with those boundaries, regardless of whatever the external influencers or factors are, right, when you're having conflict. So again, we're talking about when you're establishing or when you're engaging in conflict, how do you handle that? And I think that's a very key point away for the push and the pull piece. You wanted to add something, Mr.
I'm sorry, my thing kind of.
No, you're fine.
I'm
So
sorry about that.
number 5, I think in the last session we talked
let's go to
about
number 5.
Yeah. Number 5 is the human shield. And as you can see, it's when a co-parent connects with a new partner. So whether it's the man connecting with a new woman, or whatever preference or what preference they may have, and vice versa for the mother as well, when connecting with a new partner, this is what they call the human shield. And I think early on, Mr. Hunter made a good point about, when we talked about establishing boundaries and setting expectations. Sometimes our co-parents tend to forget to clue the new partner in to the established boundaries, right? And I think a lot of times this is a difficult and a challenging situation, because a lot of times new partners want to be involved, right? They want to be able to show the parent, I can be a parent as well, and I want to be active, especially if they're constantly hearing, the troubles or the woes of the parent that they are, with in this particular relationship. And one thing that I tell a lot of my parents a lot of time is, you don't know, especially those who are involved in co-parenting relationships, you don't know the established history, right? Because there's a pattern of behavior that was established with these two individuals, and you don't know what hurt is there. You don't know how they've learned to communicate with each other. So learn how to ease your way into the dynamic. And what I tell the parents that I work with, help ease your partner into this dynamic. And when you're dealing with conflict, don't include the new partner in the conflict. So again, we're talking about, how do I handle conflict? It is not beneficial to a relationship. And I've seen this time and time again, where there is this new partner and an old situation, right? An old argument, it resurfaced, and the new partner want to be the person to address. And that's not appropriate, because there's already conflict. They're already trying to work through it. And so one of the things that I try to encourage is avoid using the human shield. Avoid having the new partner answer the calls. Avoid having the new partner answer the text messages. Yes, you are heard. Yes, you feel like they can articulate how you feel better, but how you feel better to the other person. At least that's what you think. At the end of the day, it's two people who created a child and our children. And those two people need to be the two people to address the challenge and to address the conflict. It should not be the dynamic foursome where everybody comes to the table and everybody want to deal with it. I think one of the things that's really important is for the two original parents to decide how or when is it appropriate for the new partner to insert themselves. Outside of that, what I have tried to recommend to a lot of my parents, my co-parents, is try to address the situation as if it's the two of you having to address the situation, because a third or a fourth, they're going to bring in their ideas. They're going to bring in their beliefs. They're going to bring in, their combat boots. And what we want to try to avoid is people not showing up in combat boots, but people wearing flats. That's my little girly term. Miss Dina looking like, what? She said flats. But it's really important that when we talk about the human shield, I think if you know certain things trigger a person, I think Mr. Hunter talked about it. You got to pick up your child and you already know this is a touchy subject. Try to ask your new partner to stay in the car, or try to ask your new partner to stay at home until you're able to establish certain boundaries. If you're having that difficult conversation, ask your new partner, please don't get on the three-way call. Let me and this person have our own style, our own two-way dialogue. Let us be able to come to the best conclusion. I'll include your feedback, but what I don't want to do, at least what I've always told the fathers, try to have, the new partner just wait their turn until you guys are able to establish a more healthier relationship. I've seen where a lot of parents, both on the father side as well as the mother side, try to insert the new partner in as the surrogate parent. Like, they're a better father than you. They're a better mother than you. And it's damaging. And it goes back to that trash talking, right? I've heard fathers say, I like my new girlfriend because she's a better mother, because they're getting along, right? And I've heard some of my female parents, I like my new boyfriend because he's a better father. He shows up to the game and he's involved and he's active. I always try to tell my parents, these are their representatives. They are trying to show you that they can be involved, they can be supported. And by all means, we want them to have great relationships with the kids. But when it comes to dealing with conflict between the two parents, it is best, especially early on in a relationship, for the two original parents to address each other and ask for the new partner to please wait until you guys have been able to establish some type of boundary understanding. But there should not be a situation early on in conflict where the new partner is trying to address one of the original parents. That just continues to add unnecessary conflict that can be avoided if the two original parents work it out between themselves. Mr. Hunter, I know you brought this up in every single point that we talked about tonight about, somebody bringing somebody in and I was like, we're going to get to the human shield pretty soon. So what is some of your feedbacks or your tips? Because I know we have, from what I've seen in the audience, we have a lot of women on this call that either are treating men or are dating men with kids. What is your thoughts on how to address it? Because we have men that say, you don't know her, you don't know what I deal with. I'm trying to be a man, but I'm not trying to, disrespect it because I got a mama. How do you feel about that?
The biggest thing is discipline. A lot of fathers don't, when a man comes in, sometimes that the mother of the child lets him discipline. That doesn't work because the child goes back and tells the dad, he's trying to tell me what to do and I can't do this. And even with the fathers, we have one father, he had his girlfriend come in and she tried to tell the child what to do. It got back to the mother. We told him, listen, she had no business disciplining your child. That's between you and the mother of your child. Y'all sit down and talk about discipline. You have to talk to her and let her know, this is not your child. You got to say it in a nice way to listen. Please don't discipline if my child did something, let me know and I will talk to them. This way, it doesn't get back to the mother that, oh, no, you got her disciplining her. That's my child, da, 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 da. And one of the biggest things with the dad is discipline. Is that when they get back, then, they feel the mother of the boyfriend is trying to discipline the child. And that's one of the things that's the biggest issue that a lot of guys have is that I'm the father. You don't let this man be disciplining my child. Talk to me about it. We will work out the discipline part. He just came in the picture, and it gets back to him because the child comes back and tells him, well, what's the name, put me on punishment and da, 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 or, something else happened that the dad didn't like. And then he goes back and forth with the mother. So I agree. When you bring somebody, you got to bring them in slowly. And like you said, they want to get in because they want to, it's like that, they want to put on that, like when you first meet somebody, that presentation that they can be a good father to that child or they can be a better father to that child. It's like you're showing yourself on even the mothers, because you already have a bad relationship with that other parent. So now they come in, I can be a better mother, I can be a better father. It's a show, but you're not fooling the child because if you're a good father and you're a good mother, that child going to know that you're not my mother, you're not my father. Mm-hmm. So you really got to be very, very careful how you do it and just let the person who you bring into your life know, listen, this is my, first of all, I'm not going to introduce you to my child right now until we get to know each other a little bit better. And as the relationship grows, and then I tell them, you ask the mother, listen, or the father, I want to introduce him to my child. Is it okay? I'm just going to let you know this is what I'm going to do. This way you're communicating to the whole thing. You're putting them part of the relationship so they know that now the child is going to meet this parent, your significant other or whatever. But if you think this is going to be a fling, don't even do that. Unless it gets serious, that's the only time you should be really bringing another person into your child's life, period. If it's not going to be, if you can see it ain't going nowhere, the worst thing you can do is bringing a woman to woman or man to man in this child's life. That's not good. You just take it slow. and see how the relationship goes before you even bring that other person into that child's life. And that avoids a lot of pitfall, a lot of arguments, and even a lot of agony, even for the child, because you bring in, it doesn't make you look good, it doesn't make her look good, and all it does is, it avoid a lot of arguments. It avoid a lot of arguments. Then 2 weeks later, you ain't seeing that person. Now you done had all these issues with your mother, your child, your father, your child, and that person's gone. Just take your time. Just take your time and let it grow. And then when you know you're gonna be serious with this person, then you bring them in. But you got to set boundaries with them too.
And I think one of the things that I have expressed, and I've done it in my co-parenting relationship early on, and when things are calmer, let me say that, not when we're in the midst of conflict, which is one of the things that we're talking about tonight, like how do we deal with, conflict? And one of the things that we're talking about in dealing with conflict is, having a human shield or inserting a third party. One piece that we talked a lot about early on was a new partner, but I think also a human shield that, before we move to the last one for the evening, is family members. We have meddling parents, meddling aunts. And so sometimes those are used as human shields, or, meddling fathers or whomever, even friends, who want to have our best intent behind, their actions or what have you. Human shields are not just a new partner. Human shields can be anybody outside of the two original parents. And so one of the things that I really work very hard to stress to co-parent is, this is your relationship. This is your dynamic. And I know some fathers that I work with, I'm not in a relationship with her. It is a form of a relationship. Whether you are girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, it is a form of a relationship. And in being in a relationship and having child or children, it's really important to try to make sure that the two original parents establish those boundaries, establish those expectations. And so what I was mentioning earlier was, in terms of a new partner, me and my co-parent, we have established boundaries. We know what is acceptable and not acceptable. And one of the things, we don't have a son, but one of the things that we talked about early on was, if I got a new partner and it's a guy, would it be acceptable for him to take my son to get a haircut? No, it's not. That is something that is a bond between, father and son, and it's not acceptable. And it goes back to the trash talking. So I think, again, really sitting down and having those conversations. For me, me and my daughter getting our hair done together, that is sacred. So no, you and your new partner and her cannot take my daughter to go get the hair done. But that's my expectations that we set early on. And I use those two as an example because it's really important for, when you talk about a human shield and a third party inserting themselves, is for the two original parents to talk about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Whether you agree or not agree, this is your co-parent, and there are some things that you're going to, ideally, you're going to have to compromise on, right? And then we talked about, me and Mr. Hunter early on, we talked about picking your battles. What is the battle to win, and when is the battle not to pick, right? When is to kind of wave the white flag and say, okay, I'll let you have this one, but I want this one. So one of the things that we did when we talked about establishing a new partner is, what is something that is acceptable and, it's not. I had a couple friend that was going through counseling, and the woman wanted to take the little girl to get her prom dress. She has a mother, and the mother is actively involved. And the girlfriend got really upset, like, I want to be a part of it. I want to show her. And so we had to talk about establishing boundaries. And the father had to really push back on his girlfriend and say, no, the mom is involved. This is something that the mom wants to do. If y'all have a better relationship, I would say you could go along. But this is something that the mother wants to do. And it took a lot for him to say no, because this is a new partner. But he ended up having to say no, because I don't want conflict in my co-parenting dynamic. I know how she is. I know this is important. I know it's important to you, but I don't want to step on her toes. And that is when we talk about establishing those boundaries and establishing those expectations and making sure that your human support system, because I think Mr. Hunter made a really good point, create a community of support. But having that human support is also really important to make sure that, for a lack of a term, they stay in their lane and they know where their boundaries begin and end. Whether they mama, papa, daddy, uncle, cousin, girlfriend, boyfriend, love of my life, whatever. Everybody has a lane that they need to stay in so that the two original parents can parent their child and address the issue and not the person. You have anything you want to add to that, Mr. Tyrone?
Yeah, one of the things you said, like I wanted to take my grandson to get his haircuts, but I asked my daughter to ask his father, is it okay? Because I know as a man, that's a man thing.
Yeah.
So he said it's okay, he didn't mind, but I wanted to make sure he understood. I didn't want to take that away from him because, so yeah, it was fine, but I'm glad you brought that up because it doesn't matter who it is, so.
Yep, exactly. And it's about including that parent, right? So we are at the 6th one. If I can make it move. I can't make it move. There it is. I think Ms. Dana gave me that look. So withholding the child, withholding the child. And this is one of the things are punishing the other co-parent. And we talked a lot about this throughout the evening as we talked about how do we, address conflict or how do we handle conflict when it's occurring. And we find this to occur a lot, right? During visitation, the father might have the kids and the mom might be calling and the father's like, I'm not answering the call because the kids are with me. She leaves me alone. Or, the kids are with the mom and the dad want to call and talk. Don't call here when they're with me. That's a form of withholding. Or, the mom, using this as an example, it's not, one situation, but the mom might need a reprieve and the father knows that the mom is going through whatever she's going through. It's like, I'm not showing up. And so, or, I'm not going to be there. Or I'm not going to help with the birthday party and vice versa, right? Mom is like, I'm not sending clothes over to the father's house. He has to figure it out on his own. Those type of withholding are punitive and it does not help with conflict. And so it's kind of like that trash. It's not what I call like the nonverbal trash talking, but it's using the child. It's using the child's time. And that goes back to what we talked about in number 1 is always putting the child first, making sure that you don't make it difficult. And withholding is making it difficult for the other co-parent to communicate. And so when we talk about withholding is also like you see a text, you see a call, and you like, I don't want to be bothered, so I'm just going to ignore it for 2 weeks, or I'm going to go out of town and not let them know that I'm going out of town. All of that is a form of withholding and punishing. And one of the things that I really try to tell co-parent is when you get to that point where we start playing, tag with each other's time or showing, who has the bigger role in the dynamic in the relationship, or I'm taking you back to court, or I'm doing this and I'm doing it, get a mediator. Whether it's a friend or, somebody that you both respect, get a mediator or look for a parent coordinator. There's so many organizations that have parent coordinators where both of you can come together and mediate this particular conflict. We've gave you, 5 different conflict tools to utilize or to recognize when, how to de-escalate conflict. If you can't not find yourself being able to de-escalate, conflict, and you find yourself in this kind of petty going back and forth, push and pull, it's really good to bring in the third party that's not your new partner, that's not the mama, daddy, cousin, all that we talked about, right? But to get a non-partisan party to come in and really say, okay, let me hear your side, let me hear, his side, and let me help you guys mediate. Not make a decision and say, girlfriend, I believe you, or boyfriend, I believe you, but definitely make sure that you bring in somebody who is not going to side with one or the other to help you come to a decision together without you having to go through this cycle of withholding or punishing someone. Mr. Hunter, how do you feel about this? Because I know you've heard a lot of the fathers talk, a lot about the withholding. Because I know some mothers have talked about the withholding of child support checks. I'm not paying her until I see my kids. And that's a big one here in Georgia. As far as like, I'm not paying her another dime, or I'm not getting the kids anything until she does X, Y, and Z. So it's on both sides. But what has been your experience?
One of the biggest things, so yeah, and as you know, in the state of Georgia, if you're not married, you have to get legitimization before you can see your child. Mm-hmm. So I have dads that haven't seen their child in like 2 years, and they're still paying child support for one reason or the other, because the mother still has feelings for the father. He doesn't want to be with her, so she withholds the child from him because he found somebody else, and so it's a lot. And the father's been there in the beginning, and then all of a sudden he can't see his child. And like you said, in the long run, whoever if it's the father, it's the mother, in the long run, you're hurting the child. Because, if you think one of the things that, if you think not having a father in that child's life is not important, boy or girl, especially a girl, and if you think, and he's a good man, you're mistaken, because having a father in a child's life is very important. And withholding a child is just hurting the child, and we have to learn to put all that petty stuff aside, whatever's going on, and put that child first. And I hear too many sad stories with my dads. I don't know much about the woman, but I do know about my dads. And there's a lot of sad stories going on where some of these guys are good guys. They're working, they want to see their child, and they haven't seen their child in a while, and, then they're hurting and they're trying to fight so they can get to see their child. And it's unfortunate, like you said, but what we do is when they fill out the paperwork, you make sure you put in the time that you're going to see the child, that you'll work it out, because you can't work it out between each other. So like you said, you have a mediator there that works out the time, and you make sure you put the time that is allocated to you, and they both sign off on it. And to me, this is a touchy subject, because I see it too often, I hear it too often, and I don't know much about the mother side, so I can speak for the father side. And it's heartbreaking, because I see it a lot. And yeah, there are dads that are not, there on purpose, don't want to be there because they want to be there. But, and I deal with those too, and we work with them, but there's a lot of fathers out there that this right here is heartbreaking, because you got dads paying child support, and the law can't even help them until they really get legitimization and showing that they're really the fathers. And so that's something that we really have to work on. If that's the man, that's the father, and he's a good father, and he's a good man, you need to let that child see his father. And fathers, if you out there and, and if you have your child, she calls, just pick up the phone, let her talk to him. It works both ways. So, but I can only speak for dads right now. And if mom's is out there, and if you have a good man and he's wanting to work with you, and he treats his child the way he should, don't withhold it. Don't withhold him. Try to work it out the best way you can, but really let that father be in his life. That's really. That's really.
I'm sorry. No, I was saying I totally agree with you. I think even I've seen it in scenarios with parents when kids have important events. Or they make the honor roll. I've seen this several times. Kids make the honor roll, or they have a play at school, or they play in sports, that one of the co-parents don't share the time of the game. So it looked like the parent is absent, or the parent didn't show up. And I think that goes back to, to what you said. It's even, yes, we always say, if you can't resolve the conflict amongst yourselves, you definitely want to, put it on paper, get the courts involved. But even with that, really try to make sure to include the parent, because at the end of the day, in those milestone moments, right? Because at the end of the day, the child is looking for both parents, and the child wants to be a part of both parents' lives. And I think when we talk about, which is tonight's subject, how do you handle conflict, right? And there's so many different types of conflict that we can go into and that we can talk about. And I think the one of the most important things for tonight when we're discussing conflict is when you're in the midst of the conflict. So yes, we want to try to have you as the audience avoid, conflict where it takes you into court. And that's be another workshop. Like, how do you get to the point where you take your co-parent into court when you're dealing with conflict? But when we're talking about tonight is if you have an active, communication or engagement with the other co-parent, what does that look like when you're in the midst of conflict and you start withholding information about, parent-teacher conference or games or birthday parties, or it could be something small of, they did a science project. Include that co-parent in some of that. And that's a part of withholding. When you talk about withholding because you upset with something that the other person did or behavior, and you decide to withhold those little moments, that's hurtful to the child, because it makes it seem like that other parent is not invested and that other parent is not involved. And so with the fathers that I work with who have, ongoing engagement with the mom, I say, ask the question. If you legitimize and the child and you have rights to the school, call the school and get the calendar. If the mom is not, if the mom is not sharing, because I've heard some moms say he doesn't even ask about school or he doesn't ask about the calendar. And so I've had to tell dads, take the extra step and if you have the right, call the school, get the calendar. But don't one parent withhold from the other parent, because if both parents, want to co-parent effectively, which is, part of what we're talking about, both parents need to be effective in communication and not say one parent. And it kind of goes back to that push and pull piece. Don't share one thing, but don't share the other stuff. Share everything. Include that parent in that child's life as much as possible as you can. And again, don't go in there with the expectation they're going to say no. If you say, 10 times in a row, ask them to show up to the game, 11 times, 12 times, still let them know when are the games and allow for that parent to make that decision whether or not they want to show up. And the same thing, ask 10 times, when are the games, and hopefully you'll get to that 11th time where they say, here's the game, because they see that you're consistent. All of this, when we're dealing with conflict, right, it takes time, because at the end of the day, some people might have feelings. I hear a lot of fathers say, she still has feelings for me. She still loves me, whatever. And I say sometimes that might be true. But then there's other times where it's just a simple, I apologize for hurting you, on both sides. Sometimes it's not even about a new partner. Sometimes it's not about, I still in love with you. Sometimes it is about the conflict that has occurred in the past that somebody never just stopped and said, I apologize. And it's about ownership and owning your role in the dynamic. And sometimes, that's called humbleness. And what I find with a lot of the partners that I've worked with, when we really get to the core of the conflict, it all boils down to he or she just didn't say, I'm sorry. He or she just couldn't own her part. And I think that's really important of what we're talking about tonight, outside of all the different conflicts that we have, because there's so many, right? We talked about bringing in a new partner. We talked about sharing information. We talked about have to go to court. We talked about, visitation. There's so many different types of conflicts. But in tonight's discussion, as me and Mr. Hunter discussed, is if you're having active engagement with your co-parent, how do you handle conflict? And how do you set those expectations and how you address the problem and not necessarily the person? And sometimes out of everything that we said, it's really sitting back and saying, you know what? I probably never said, I'm sorry for not showing up to the hospital. I'm probably very sorry that I didn't invite you to the baby shower. Or I'm really sorry that I'm using you, Tyrone, Tyrone at the house when you came over and it was your time. Sometimes it's as simple as, I'm sorry, when you really look back and you reverse or you replay a course of some months or some days and say, you know what, I can see how that was a snowball effect and see how we got here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think I'm sorry, Mr. Tyrone, go ahead. Go ahead, you was talking?
No, I was saying that's one big thing, and I'm glad you mentioned schools. One of the things I tell dads is very important that they show up at the school. Mm-hmm. Teachers like to see dads show up. They really do, because we don't do that enough. And that's one thing we encourage fathers. They don't think it's important. I realized when I started showing up at the school, it was a big difference. Mm-hmm. And so, and the teacher said, we don't see enough dads. So I do encourage my dads, go to the school. Mm-hmm. If she tells you when they're teaching parents, you need to show up. And if any dads in the thing, you need to show up. They like to see dads, mm-hmm. They just like to see us, and then they know both parents are involved, and that's very important. And the child likes to see you there. Oh, my dad, this is my dad. So true. Yeah, I like that. I wanted to chime in on that part.
Very true. No, you're good. I like that you rubber stamp that, because I think from some of the moms that I've talked to, they feel like the burden, especially in COVID, right? When a lot of kids had to go to Zoom. A lot of fathers was like, I don't know how to help you. Your mama got it, right? And I heard a lot of moms say, I'm overwhelmed and he won't show up. And that's when I saw a lot of heavy conflict really surfacing, because you have moms who was at home trying to work and fathers are out, you know, I don't want to say living their best life, but this is their words, not mine. And the mom is like, I have to do school, I have to work, I got to put the kids, we're just together 24 hours and he doesn't show up, he doesn't call, right? And then I've heard some of the fathers, I know one father, he just broke down and was like, she's not even showing up. It's like the kid is here and that's it. And so I think, you know, to your point, it's got to be both parents parenting together and really, you know, lifting each other up as best can. And if you can't uplift each other, uplift the child, if for nothing else, and share that information. It breaks my heart when I hear parents say, I have a birthday party, she have a birthday party. And it's like, 2 birthday parties? Yeah, can't come together, Chuck E. Cheese for 1 hour? But all of that. And so it kind of brings us to, you know, the summary of what we have talked about. You know, always try to be kind, ignore where you can, keep the channels of communication open, try to be collaborative in the decision, not to use your human shields. I put S to it. Look at your own behavior. I think a lot of times in the work that we do, we hear from the clients, them. And sometimes we have to say, whoa, what was your part in this? And, you know, it goes back to that tone, the trash talking, the wearing the combat boots, ready, you know, to fight. Really, you know, for a lot of the males that I work with and the females that I work with, I'm always like, what was your part? What was your role? How could you have handled the situation better? What could you have done differently? And when I hear them say nothing, you know, that's when we get into the deep work, because it's like, there's always something, you know, we can do, right? Make sure the children are protected. I love that, Mr. Tyrone, earlier you talked about making sure that the children are not present, or the child's not present when you start to see it escalate, and say, I'll come back to you when the child is not around, because they are impacted by it and they remember it and they hear it, even when it's over. Mr. Tyrone, you brought up a good point. Even though the other parent is not around, you still argue, you still fussing with yourself, and the children can hear it, right? So really try, not necessarily shielding, but, you know, temper your spirit, temper your tongue, as they would say, when the children are around and you're upset and you're angry. Meditation and parenting coordination, as we talked about before going into attack mode. Basically, that means to tag out, right? And when you start to feel your body going there, or your mind start going there, or that tongue start lippering, or like I said, I get to text vomiting. I'm human, because I'm in this co-parenting situation. I'm like, let me move away from the phone. Let me turn the phone off, so I can't see any of his responses. Let me go listen to, you know, I'm an Usher fan, so I'm like, let me go put some Usher on. That tag out, so I can, you know, like breathe, or as my daughter said, breathe in the flowers, blow out the candles. That's a good takeaway. What do you have to say, Mrs. Howard? Yeah, that's what you tell me all the time when I get mad. I'm like, hold on, baby. Breathe in the flowers, blow out the candles. But what do you have to say for summary before we go into question and answer, Mr. Tyrone?
No, I like all what you put down there. You said seek meditation and prayer. We had our guys. We had an event for them to show them how to meditate, to let them meditate. You know, instead of getting angry, getting upset, and taking it out. We taught them how to meditate. And people don't understand how meditation is really, really good for you. And so we did some events for them, to try to, channel their anger that they're going through, instead of channeling it the wrong way, channel it a positive way. But make sure your children is protected from anger and fighting. That to me, that is the number one thing right there, because you don't realize how important that is, because I'm going through that with my youngest daughter with her mother, because of the things she did and things she said. They don't really talk. So, because she's seen a lot of stuff and she heard a lot of stuff, but she shouldn't have heard. And so if you really don't think any of you say, well, I don't see my child, it doesn't seem to affect her now. It will. It will down the road. You'll see it down the road, and you'll see her relationships that she had with others is what, the child acts how she sees. So, just be protecting of the child on that.
Awesome. So we're gonna turn it over to Miss Dina so she can tell us if we have any questions for anyone before we close out. It's 8:16, so we went 15 minutes over time, but we're hoping that everybody was enjoying the tips and the conversation. So Miss Dina, what do you have for us?
Just a little bit. I just do have a few questions. I want to thank you all just for, what you shared, especially on the withholding part. The work here I do in Baltimore, that's kind of a big issue here. And then in my research on father mental health, the damage it does to the mental health of fathers to have their children withheld. I mean, I've had dads like literally crying in our office, like, I can't see my kids, this is serious. And then I think a lot of people don't understand how the mental health of the father also affects the mental health of the mother. So these are some great points that you all shared. I think one of the questions that was posed is, do you have tips for someone who has a partner who wants no part of this information, like not even trying, doesn't want to even attempt to apply any of the lovely tools that you shared today? Is there any information for how to interact with situations where your co-parent is not trying to cooperate?
So I will give my 2 cents, and then I'm gonna turn it to Tyrone. Everybody, and I've had this question posed to me in other sessions, and it is a really great question, right? Everybody in their parenting is in different phases, and some are further along in their journey than others. And as we say in therapy, you got to meet people where they are. And so where they are is resistant to the great information, but the best information that we gave you is set your own expectations, and be consistent. This work does not happen overnight. It takes time. And if you can't do it in an amicable way, as Mr. Tyrone said, it's time to start, heating up that bank account and going to court and doing what you have to do for the benefit of the child. Because at the end of the day, it's really about how do we serve the child? How do we meet the child need? But I always tell, some of the parents that I have worked with, when they say this is, the first step is try to be vulnerable and have a one-on-one and a heart-to-heart, and, apologize. Sometimes it's better to give an apology that you never expect that you're going to have to give. And sometimes that has helped, it's like, I apologize for my part, and whatever it is that I did that may or may not hurt you, because you have some people who say, you didn't hurt me, I'm not emotional, right? But sometimes you have to give that apology that you wasn't expecting to give. Sometimes you have to be humble, and meet people where they are and start at baby steps. And sometimes baby steps is, let's do, if it's, about communication, let's start with texting, then let's move to a phone call, then let's move to face-to-face. And if you see that works, stay consistent with it, but don't expect for something to happen overnight. You can't leave out of this session after an hour and then get on the phone and be like, okay, I want to say I'm sorry. Can I see my child? Can we make it work? And then go, I knew it wasn't going to work. It was wasting my time. It takes time. From my personal experience, and I'll give it to Mr. Tyrone. I've been in this situation for 8 years, and I can say that we probably just got to the place where we can now laugh and tell a joke without one of us rolling our eyes. And that's 8 years. And I have friends who have kids who are 17 years old, and they're like, okay, we just got to the place we can be in the same room together. Everybody's journey is very different. I have some, co-parenting friends who from day one, they made it work. It worked well because they were determined to make sure there wasn't a lot of conflict. That's not to say that they don't have no problem, but they established early on, we don't want no conflict. We want both parties to be involved, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure we keep communication. It's kind of like a pseudo marriage. There is no divorce. And for them, there is going to be no conflict that is going to hinder you from seeing or engaging your child. So the best tool, and I'll turn it to Mr. Tyrone, is, try with humbleness, try to stay consistent, try to be open, try to stay open, try to be flexible. And then if that doesn't work, there's always that court system that will make the deciding factor for you, and help you navigate through this when you have somebody who is difficult. Mr. Tyrone?
What I tell my dad, this information is for you. It's not, you can't force anybody to do anything they don't want to do. One of the things I tell my dad, they need to see the change in you. Sometimes people need to see the change in you, then they can ask, oh, I guess the thing you're going to is kind of working. But if they don't see the change in you and you're going to all this stuff, they may say, see, I told you it ain't no good, but it's not for the other person, it's for you. And you got to take this program and do, like, you know, Shelley just said, just work it in with yourself and just try to change yourself. And I just agree, you can't force anybody to do anything. There's no way there's nothing we can say to say, wow, you know, you just need to force, because if they come, they're not going to listen. They're just going to be, yeah, whatever. This is for you. Let the person, whoever it is, see the change in you. As people see the change in you, that's when sometimes they're like, okay, what's that program you went to? Maybe then I can want to, you know, check it out.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very helpful. I think that was the most frequently asked question that we had for this evening. And then the last one, there was a mention of mindfulness earlier, and someone was asking, do you have like a quick tip? When they asked the question, it made me think of the old Family Matters show where he would be like, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, what the heck is bothering me? And so they're asking, like, is there a quick, like, a reset or a tool that you all use when things have kind of blown out of proportion and you just want to recenter and bring it back?
Yes. So I'll answer. I have an applause in the background. So mindfulness is something that I taught a group of parents a while ago, and it starts off, and I bring that up because it's so many mindfulness tips and tools that's, you know, on Google. So if you have access to, you know, Google or YouTube, definitely take a look at it. The first part about it is really meditating, and I think we put it in there. And so one of the things that I tell some of my co-parents, and I even do myself, is I meditate. And when I say meditate, I'm not the comfortable person, you know, keep my eyes closed, but I take silent moments. And before I go into, you know, what I think might be a difficult situation with my co-parent, and I center myself. The other piece to it is, as I mentioned, tapping out. When you feel your body, and everybody knows, if you really pay attention to when you get upset, some people toes tremor, some people start shaking, some people, you know, get headaches, some people, you know, their eyes start to water up or whatever. Everybody has something in their body where their brain sends a signal to their body to say, I'm upset or I'm angry or whatever that, you know, high emotion is. And I'm giving you mindfulness in like 1 minute. But so one of the things is to recognize the signs of when you're getting upset. And when you start to recognize those signs and you pay attention to those signs of when you're starting to get upset or when your body is starting to react, everybody has something different. And so in mindfulness, they talk to you about thinking about things that bring you into a happy place. One piece, I think when you were talking about 1, 2, 3 off of Family Matters of Whitney, relax, relate, release. And in your mind, relax, release, release. And so mindfulness says, think about a place that makes you happy. And in your mental mind, go to that place. So whether it's listening to a song or whether it is being on the beach, if you know that your partner is triggering you, one, we always say walk away, and, you know, but be respectful, because you don't want a person to, you know, run behind you and say, hey, give me a moment. Sometimes I've had clients, you know, they have a favorite rap song. And so I said, well, start thinking about the verses in your head and start rapping the song, right? Because music relaxes the body. And that's what we learn a lot about in mindfulness, is playing certain music. So we look at, you know, touch, we look at smell, we look at feel, we look at, you know, our sight, all of the different senses in mindfulness. And so as a co-parent, when you're dealing in conflict, those are the things that you need to start thinking about. Like, what is a smell? So if, you know, if you like cigars, I have a girlfriend, she really likes, you know, the cigar smell. So she starts thinking about the smell of cigars and hanging out and, you know, and drinking on her brandy to calm her down. I had another client, like I said, who liked rap songs. So start rapping a song in their mind, so it's not disrespectful to the other person. I tend to dance in my head, believe it or not, or I'll think about going, you know, to a beach. Those are things that you practice. If you have a saying, like, you know, a funny joke, say it in your head. Mindfulness is all about what's going on in your mind. calm your body down in a sense of heightened emotions and get your body back to center. And so I would encourage you to, look it up and Google it, because it talks about when you're center, being paying attention. Like right now, I'm hoping that nobody is in a high conflict, situation. They're feeling good. So this is how you record your body. Like, oh, I'm happy. So this is what my body feels like when I'm happy. And then when you get upset the next time, you go, oh, this is what my body feels like when I'm upset. And so when you're practicing mindfulness in a heightened situation with your co-parent, you bring yourself down into the center place of like right now of how you're feeling. And you do that by thinking about a happy place, a happy moment, a song, a dance in your mind, and you visualize it. That is like a quick mindfulness session. But I can't give you the relax, relate, release. You have to figure out what brings you back down into your center. Whatever that is. So find a saying that you like, find a song. Those are those things that you need to do to practice for mindfulness when you're dealing in conflict situations. The short answer to that.
Well, one of the things, I have some of my guys, that's why we did the meditation class for them, which helped a lot of guys so they learn how to meditate. As you know, I'm a ministry, so, I just take it to the Lord, and and I have one of the guys that he does the same thing. You sit down in your quiet room, you just take it to the Lord, and that's what I do. And I had another gentleman tell me the same thing. He sits and he reads his Bible and he takes it to the Lord. But we have, we have some guys that didn't know how to do it. So when we did the meditation class, they signed up with the young lady that did it, so they can learn how to, relax. Relax, relate, release, and music. Sometimes some of the music that I might listen to might calm me down, because when you feeding, you need to get fed too, so you have to find that you got to find that center of yourself. And like what you just said, you can Google it. You got to find something that works for you. We can give you advice, but you need to find something that works for you.
Dina, I'll say this, the mindfulness is, I'll think about all the senses. So, and I probably messed it up, but it's the sight, it's been a while, it's the sight, it's the taste, it's what you hear, it's what you see, and what you feel. So when you Google mindfulness and you begin to practice it, when you look it up on YouTube, it'll walk you through those 5 things to bring your body back into its center place of where you are, right, or where you are in this happy moment, as you say. And so that is how the mindfulness tool works. When you talk about when you're in a high conflict situation. So thinking about if your mouth is dry, how do you make it wet again to center you? If you're thinking about sight, what it is that you're looking at, finding a center. So those are the 5 things for mindfulness that you have to practice when you're trying to practice mindfulness. But I would encourage anybody on here to definitely Google it. There's a book around mindfulness that I would encourage you to get. It's a great tool to have in your pocket. And it doesn't cost a lot of money because it's free on Google.
Thank you all for your tips. I think on my end, I use pineapples. It reminds me of a Kevin Hart joke. He used it in a different context, but it brings me back to that special. So, I'll even yell it out loud and it'll make us both laugh. I'm like, pineapples. And then it's over. So thank you all for all your tools, everything you shared tonight. Before I wrap up, did you want to just share one more time your contact information if someone wants to contact you or see your work?
Yeah, so I can be found 2 places on Instagram, on Dean Shelley Rowe or co-parenting _coach. So you can follow me and find me there, co-parenting _coach. I'll put it in the chat box. And you can reach out to me there.
You can find me on my Facebook. It's the name Playbook for Fatherhood. And also my website is right on that. And also I'm on Instagram as a Playbook for Fathers. Those are my 2 contacts. You can follow me there.
All right, thank you. Thank you both so much. A lot of great tips this evening. I think it's very important because conflict is, inevitable, but it doesn't have to be traumatic. And so a lot of these tools will be very helpful for managing conflict. And it's important, I guess, that we know that it's not too late. So even if we have in the past been, issuing out some of these behaviors, that we can change and we can start creating better relationships with our co-parent. If anyone is interested in additional webinars, so this is a series that we are doing for improving relationships between co-parents. If you would like to connect with the overarching organization, which is the Fathers Matter Atlanta, you can look up on Facebook. I dropped the link in the chat, but for those who are listening, if you are on Facebook, it is Fathers Matter ATL. And then it's also Fathers Matter on YouTube. So you can subscribe and connect onto the site. You could also email fathersmatterga@gmail.com if you would like more information or if you want to be notified when the next event is set to occur. So thank you everyone for being on tonight. And yes, happy holidays. We hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody.
Bye. They didn't get all that.